transitions. There's no one single transition. Yeah. Regions have different starting points, they have different needs and interests, and so there's no single pathway, and everybody's struggling. Yes, it's not a simple challenge of just swapping out one tech and putting in a new one. It's a big change.
And you made a very interesting point. I think it was last night you were speaking, but it was picked up in a piece I was looking at, that actually you need to redefine and reclaim this transitions as well, because it is polarising, it is loaded, it is a source of confusion and misunderstanding. I think that's the understatement of the year almost. It is absolutely loaded and confusing, isn't it?
It's mind-boggling. There's so many different pieces of this puzzle that have to be managed at the same time. And that's a challenge for everybody. Businesses can't do this on their own. Governments can't do them on their own. Mayors can't do it on their own. So we're bringing them all together here in Rotterdam. And we're saying, what is the new energy ecosystem, the new change-maker system that really needs to be put in place? Because we can't have businesses saying, governments, you need to regulate better, regulators saying to businesses, you need to step up. We're just going around pillar to post all the time. We've got to accelerate that change-making process.
But I think something that I hear time and time again from energy executives, dare I say historically oil and gas executives, is the need to solve the trilemma, not just the transition. And I wonder, and I've thought a lot about this, these two different concepts. The trilemma being, it needs to be equitable, just, it needs to be secure, and it needs to be affordable as well. Is the trilemma, and first time I've ever asked this, so you shoot me down, is the trilemma a way of diluting actually the energy transition for these companies?
Absolutely not. We put the trilemma together. The World Energy Council actually provides the World Energy Trilemma framework. We put it together in the 1980s to connect the dots between energy and sustainable development. The energy transition from what to what? We're transitioning, some parts of the world are transitioning to clean, affordable, reliable and modern energy supplies. Some parts of the world are transitioning away from unabated fossil fuels, right? So transitions are different. But the trilemma is the most powerful framework we have for measuring performance. How do you know if you're managing your energy transition? So it's the way of measuring the performance of energy transition, and you can't reduce it to a single dimension.
No, and I'm glad you such a spirited reaction to my question, which means I'm hitting the right nerve. But I can't help thinking that there are energy executives who look at their trilemma and think, well, great, if we say we've got to provide secure energy and we've got to provide affordable, then that can actually dilute the sustainable angle. It means we can carry on longer saying, well, we've got communities that need affordable energy. They need to be able to industrialise. Hence, we can carry on producing oil and gas. And obviously, we need secure because the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine as well. So if we carry on with oil and gas, or specifically gas in this case, we can kind of get a pass on going full tilt on transition or transitions.
It's not a dichotomy, it's a trilemma. If you fail to manage all three parts, you've got one leg missing from your stool, you're going to fall over, you're heading for crisis. No, you can't do it. You can't use, the whole point is you can't use trilemma as an excuse for ignoring one of the pillars.
JP Morgan's Christian Malek, he's not over here, I checked, because I'm quite happy to speak to him about it. He's put out a piece to JP Morgan clients in the last week or so, talking about a reality check being needed actually as well, that high inflation, high cost of money, and two devastating wars. Specifically, I guess, what's going on with Ukraine he's talking about, because we haven't actually seen output declines in the Middle East as well. This is creating a new reality on the ability to transition, and actually we need to speak in decades rather than years. How do you feel about that?
I think there's a new reality for everything we're doing, geopolitically, environmentally and socially. You know, we're living in a world where, if you look at the World Energy Issues Monitor that came out this year, commodity prices and geopolitics are the biggest uncertainties. The biggest action priority is how do we get investment in transmission? That's not happening. We've got a lot of investment going into renewables in parts of the world that really are rich in energy resources, very little investment in renewables going into making a difference of billions of better lives for people that really need energy. I'm glad to say, JP Morgan, you're catching up. If you'd read the World Energy Issues Monitor this year, you'd have seen that we have been saying for at least 4 years, there's no such thing as a quick, easy, straightforward energy transition. And we can't rely on the markets, we can't rely on regulation alone to do it. We've got to have the pull of social transformation involved.
You mentioned social, and you've just taken me back nearly 9 years to November, December 2015, which was the pivotal Paris Agreement in Paris, where I was there, and Christiana Figueres was running around herding cats, as she called it, to me and others as well. But the fact of the matter is, then India and the developing nations said this isn't equitable, it's not social. But you've just said to me, pretty much, that's what's happening, i.e. most of the money being spent is still by OECD nations, by rich nations. It is not filtering through to those emerging developing nations that need it as well. That says to me, that's quite damning. That says nothing's really changed in the attitude on a global basis.
Well, I think when we put, there's nothing wrong with the climate change frameworks, but I think, first of all, I think we energy leaders have done a rubbish job in energy literacy, and actually most of the conversation has been about substituting supply without transforming demand. And you can't transform demand when you haven't got any energy that you're using. So for a large part of the world, you know, if we're really serious about just, orderly, equitable and inclusive transitions, then we've got to ask, where's demand coming from? And demand is going to rise from many emerging and developing economies to come. And if, you know, a lot of people are talking about this transition from a place of comfort and convenience. Yeah. Is that really what energy transition is about? If energy transition is really about how do we have more energy for people and planet, that's why we're here. Redesigning energy for people and planet, using the trilemma, Steve.
Using the trilemma. Well,